is intended for listeners who are blind, have low vision, or have another print disability, which makes reading, holding a book, or turning a page difficult or impossible. The content is copyrighted by the respective publishers. For more information, please visit us on the web at nfradioreading.org.
Hello, this is Evelyn, and for the next hour, I'll be reading from the December 7th and 14th issue of the New York Times Magazine on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. Heads in the Cloud. AI has already transformed the university English course, Teach But Not for the Worse, by Carlo Rotella. At the end of a class in mid-September, as everyone was gathering their things, a student named Tyler approached me. "Can we talk sometime about how we can ask the questions on our own?" He said, "We always have you to ask the questions and set up how we're going to discuss and analyze, but I'd like to know how to do that for myself, for when we don't have someone else to do it for us." I assured Tyler, whose open face under his ball cap bore the look of a guy who hoped he had not somehow offended, that this was a question he absolutely should be asking, and that the short answer was yes. I told him to bring it up again at the beginning of our next class, when we could talk about it as a group. This put us a month ahead of schedule in achieving one of my goals in any class I teach, gradually turning over to students the responsibility for defining problems and deciding how to solve them. I teach English courses at Boston College. I don't lecture much. Mostly we engage in conversation, paying attention to one another and to the book we have all read. I don't teach content so much as a way of coming at things, tools and moves we can use to extract meaning from the world around us and make well-supported arguments about what we find. Class as workshop, not factory. As in a band or team practice, everyone in the room is simultaneously developing their individual chops and participating as a member of a problem-solving community. We practice on novels, poems, and other literary artifacts, but the set of skills we're trying out is basic equipment for a living for any citizen or worker, any thinking person. It's the same toolkit you would use to make sense of a State of the Union address, the state of your neighborhood, or the sequence of events that has led you to be sitting in a cubicle or a jail cell. Tyler and his peers want to be capable humans, independent thinkers. They are not, contrary to widespread belief, universally eager to turn over every last shred of their intellectual and community-building capacity to robot servants, overlords. And as Josie, another student in the class, told me, at least some of them are not that okay with peers who rely on AI to do their work. This all runs counter to the doomy picture of helplessness painted last spring and summer by well-circulated stories about generative AI's effect on higher education. Everybody's cheating their way through college. No student is going to read a book or write a paper on their own ever again. It's the end of the essay of reading, of thinking. As professors in the humanities who were already feeling besieged by a sustained chorus that questions the value of their disciplines, considered these stories and their own encounters with AI, their unease sharpened into a specific concern about the fall semester. If they kept doing what they normally do, would they be sleepwalking into a minefield? A significant number of them did more thinking about teaching than usual over the summer, when professional scholars typically concentrate on research. As a result, they came into the fall with retooled courses featuring more purposeful approaches to writing and reading, less reliance on technology, and a renewed focus on face-to-face community. An AI-resistant English course has three main elements: pen and paper and oral testing, teaching the process of writing rather than just assigning papers, and greater emphasis on what happens in the classroom. Such a course which can't be AI proof because that would mean students do no writing or reading except under a teacher's direct supervision, also obliges us to make the case to students that it's in their self-interest to do their own work. Colleagues I've talked to around the country do discuss AI with their students, and some have found creative ways to bring it into the curriculum, but few have turned to high-tech solutions like AI detecting software or monitoring keystroke histories. Now, well into the semester, it has come as a pleasant surprise to me and to many of my fellow teachers that the AI apocalypse that was expected to arrive in full force in higher education this fall, bringing an end to reading and writing and school as we know them, has not come to pass just yet. Responding to the rise of AI by doubling down on the humanity of the humanities appears to be working, at least for the moment. When I suggested as much to Stuart Seller, who directs the program that provides required writing courses to 18,000 students at Penn State, he said, "That is a fair statement in our case. It's hard to know how much better things might be because of all the complexity and moving parts, but we have not imploded. It feels like the panic is settling down too. Some colleagues even report a notable uptick in students' engagement. Many teachers have changed the way they test students. That often means returning to old school pen and paper exams, thereby contributing to the comeback of the Blue Book, a horseshoe crab-like relic of primordial ed tech that AI has saved from extinction. Assessments like tests and quizzes should reinforce the behavior you want, so mine consist of mini-essays that gauge command of the reading and of the ideas and analytical methods we've talked about in class, with most of the points awarded for interpretive substance. As a way to sum up in the last few minutes of a class discussion, we sometimes knock around students' suggestions for a fair exam question about what we covered that day. For example, at the end of one class in the course that Tyler and Josie are taking on the city in literature and film, we came up with something like, compare how Nathaniel Hawthorne's My Kinsman Major Molyneux and the first chapter of Theodore Dreiser's Sister Carrie represent the process of becoming a city person. You can't address AI's effect on writing without considering its invitation to settle for a summary of content instead of actually reading. Exams are a delayed, high-stakes way to hold students accountable for reading. Quizzes are a lower-stakes, day-to-day way to do that. Scott Saul at the University of California, Berkeley, told me that he has started giving 5-minute pen and paper quizzes that, unlike a midterm or a final, ask for details from the text and no interpretation at all, an idea he got from Nabokov. Saul told me Nabokov would give these impossible quizzes in his Cornell classes, like in Anna Karenina, What Did Anna's Son Receive as a Birthday Present in 1875? And I'd be like, that is so nitpicky. This guy is insane. But Saul came to see the point. All of the bigger forces in our culture are pulling people away from deeply attentive reading, he said. People lack patience with the detail that makes an essay or a story or a novel have texture and depth, especially when they're used to having everything reduced to bullet point summaries or skipping over large chunks of prose as they scan on a screen. Such tech-assisted breezing through a text is to reading a novel roughly, as listening to a podcast about marriage is to being married. Nitpicking Nabokovian quizzes are one way to reinforce getting down into the details where meaning resides. I also have students scan and turn in their markups, underlinings, marginal notes, highlighting, of the hard copy they're reading, which is as close as I can get to watching them think as they read. A second response to AI for teachers who still want to assign take-home papers rather than settle for having students now do all their writing by hand in class, emphasize teaching the process of writing, breaking it down into a series of steps that a teacher can see and respond to, rather than simply grading the product. Scaffolding is the term of art in the English biz. In the case of a paper analyzing a work of literature, the steps might include noticing patterns, building them into interpretive insights, coming up with a thesis, finding evidence to support it, drafting and revising. My students this semester are writing brief weekly exercises in response to the reading that can serve as the germ of a paper, then writing drafts of papers, then revising those into final drafts. It's more work for me to read all that, but as my Boston College colleague Maya McGlavey says, pay them attention. That counts while they're still working on their papers, rather than when the paper's done and they don't care anymore or even remember. You can add peer reviews to extend such relationships to other students who don't appreciate being obliged to respond to AI slop. Getting involved at various stages of a paper's development also makes it easier for a teacher to spot a clanking disjunction between a student's thought process and the final product. To that end, I've also added a conference in which the student tells me about conceiving and writing a paper. Assigning a separate grade for the conference is another way to reward students who did their own work or penalize those who skimped on process by using AI. Just as the point of a gym is not for the weights to go up and down, but for you to move them. The objective of assigning papers is for students to think, not to fill the world with papers. Another approach to adjusting paper assignments is to make them feel more authentic by making them more personal or creative, more essayistic. Mark Edmondson offers an example from a poetry course he teaches at the University of Virginia. Are you a Whitmanian is the paper topic, he told me. So we blend some analytical work on poetry with some reflective work on the student's part. How much of Whitman's vision do they buy? How much do they find troublesome? How much are they just wanting to dismiss out of hand? A student can feed this prompt to a bot, Edmondson acknowledges, but first you have to tell ChatGPT who you are, give it a lot of details about yourself. Despite their heavily digital existences and their willingness to share their data, he says, his students are still reluctant to have their personality, character, identity usurped by a machine in the intimate ways that this kind of assignment would require. Also, students are more likely to get into writing, and therefore less likely to outsource more personal papers like these, which can feel like a project one might plausibly engage in for reasons other than to gain course credit, and the chance to take some stylistic and intellectual risks with course content offers a contrast to the more mechanical writing that students do in Blue Book exams, where the point is mostly to demonstrate that they have been keeping up with the reading and class discussions. Judging by the first round of papers in my classes, the results so far appear to be okay. I can hear the students' individual voices in their papers, which grow plausibly from exercises and drafts, for the most part without sudden bends toward the robotic. If I detect the ultra-processed flavor of AI in a paper, which is trickier to do as bots get better at mimicking human writing, I'll meet with that student to discuss their priorities. Rachel Truesdale at Framingham State University, who treats the use of AI as plagiarism, says that this kind of conversation is among the most difficult she has had with students. So far, that hasn't happened much this semester, but I hate doing it every time, she says. It can be hard to explain the difference between the "this sounds like AI" and "I don't think you're able to do good work." You are listening to a reading of articles and features from the December 7th and 14th issue of the New York Times Magazine on the Niagara Frontier radio reading service. Reports of the demise of the essay may be exaggerated, but AI could well hasten the end of teachers just telling their students to write an essay and putting a grade on the result. For decades now, teachers of composition and creative writing have been showing the rest of the profession that the path, not the destination, should be the goal. Stuart Selber of Penn State makes a distinction between teaching writing as a craft and simply assigning writing as a product that can be cranked out by AI. We don't just assign and collect writing, which is what most of the university does, he told me. If you don't know what students are doing, you're not involved in the workflow or the process, and you're not also teaching writing. The third and most important pillar of an AI-resistant course stressed the value of what happens in the classroom. Students in a humanities class are paying for the admissions policy and the hiring policy that produce the other people in the classroom for them to engage with. Everything else, reading, being talked at by talking heads, firing hot takes into the electronic void, they can do online, alone at home, in their underwear. They are probably never again going to be regularly spending undistracted blocks of time in a room with other people who have all read the same thing and are committed to getting meaning from it. So we should treat our time together like the special occasion it is, about 2,000 very expensive minutes over the course of a semester. The dawning of the AI age hasn't drastically reshaped the exchange of ideas in an English class, but it alters the meaning of such exchanges. When we're in the groove in the classroom, I'm occupied with familiar discussion, orchestrating tasks, urging Charlie to turn her violent antipathy to the top 5 list, making music snobs in high fidelity, into the germ of an analysis, reminding myself to be patient and let Andrew and Kyla cook up their points at the deliberate speed they favor, encouraging all to see how the observations that Samantha and Dylan and Yasmin have made add up to an interpretation we can evaluate and refine. We can see and hear one another thinking. Some like to ask questions, some to answer them. Some prefer to go first, some to lay back and counter. Some want to build something, some to break it down. These classroom dynamics feel timeless, but our ever greater reliance on non-human interlocutors and assistants has given new value to the very fact of face-to-face exchange between humans. Class discussions offer increasingly rare opportunities to practice talking about ideas with other people. Being a fully present member of a community pursuing a shared purpose, understanding others' views. College graduates will need such competencies to make their way in the world, even in the age of AI, and they have fewer opportunities to practice them than they did in the past. Like tests that focus on our discussions of the reading course policy shouldn't reinforce what matters most. To qualify for any grade at all in my courses, you have to actively participate in these discussions, which means, at minimum, speaking up at every class meeting. The quality of your contributions constitutes a significant part of your grade papers, other writing exercises, tests, and quizzes also count, but you can't just turn in the deliverables and sit quietly. You have to pull your weight. Another crucial policy, one that the rise of AI has inspired some teachers to finally adopt after contemplating it for years, is banning laptops and phones from class, which significantly improves classroom chemistry. Because I regularly observe the teaching of colleagues who don't enforce such bans, I've had ample opportunity to see how every student who's shopping or watching sports highlights creates a vortex of engagement-killing inattention that sucks in surrounding classmates. Students and colleagues report that device-free classrooms feel like a respite from all tech all the time, a place where they can leave off the endless clicking and scrolling, slow down, and do some thinking for themselves and with others. Building classroom community has become much more important to me over the years. The cell phone and now AI have made college a lonelier experience than it used to be, and the pandemic accelerated the long-term waning of community on campus. While my students are generally more professional and accomplished than my generation of college students was, they are also more anxious and isolated. So I try to make the classroom a place where they feel not just free to speak, but expected to speak, responsible for doing their part as a citizen. This priority imparts outsized importance to mundane habits like banning screens, getting everyone involved, making sure we know everybody's name, discussing what we're going to do and why, and finding opportunities to joke around a bit while doing our serious business. I also make clear my expectation that when I begin class, I should have to quell a hubbub of neighbors catching up, not break the funereal hush of isolatos bent in solitude over their phones. People usually have something to say, and they're more likely to say it when they feel they're part of a community. I don't have an absolute ban on using AI in my courses because I don't like to make rules I can't enforce, and I can't prove that any particular piece of work has been done by AI. Instead, in addition to making sure I place enough grading emphasis on tasks students can't use AI to accomplish, I ask them not to use any non-human assistance and to tell me if they do, and I explain why it's in their interest to do their own work. I'm asking them not only to do their own writing and reading, but to also do it the old-fashioned ways. Turn off spell check and grammar check, read a book with pen in hand, and refrain from playing Monster Hunter at the same time. Marianne Wolf, a cognitive neuroscientist at UCLA who studies reading and writing, helped me make this case to students. She told me I could say to them, "Let me show you what you are short-circuiting if you don't expend the effort in giving enough time to thinking and really focusing and immersing yourself in the material." She was referring to our ability to draw inferences, take on others' perspectives, evaluate truth, discern an underlying message, sophisticated cognitive and affective processes that lead to our best insights and can atrophy from disuse. The oldest platitude in neuroscience is, use it or lose it. I told my students all this at the beginning of the semester. It was a pretty good speech, I thought. I delivered versions of it in both of my classes, growing a little impassioned as I asked them to stand up for themselves against powerful forces, urging them toward frictionless passivity. Reading is thinking and writing is thinking, I said, and using AI to do your thinking for you is like joining the track team and doing your laps on an electric scooter. You're paying $5 a minute for college classes. Don't spend your time here practicing to be replaceable by AI. Use it or lose it, people. When I finished, the students looked back at me with the steady, earnest, ironic gaze of the young, as if to say, "You seem relieved to have gotten that off your chest, Gramps, but that's the third AI speech I've heard from a professor this week. Can we just get back to doing school?" The AI-resistant approach that teachers have collectively roughed out for the moment has major limitations. As was true before AI, students hell-bent on not doing their own work can still get away with it some of the time in courses, like mine, that still require writing outside the classroom. Also, because my enrollments top out around 30, I can count on giving individual attention to my students, but that becomes impractical at larger scales. And I can't be sure that anything that might work now will continue to work in the face of AI's relentless advance, especially the increased use of pendants and glasses, invisible earpieces, and other such wearable tech that could encroach on the face-to-face classroom. But I do have confidence in my students and in the value of what we're doing. In a humanities course, classically, you assemble equipment for a living while considering lessons in how to live. These days, humanists also find themselves teaching doing your own work, sustained attention, intellectual stamina, reasoned disagreement, and other meta skills in ever shorter supply in the culture at large. This tech-obsessed moment may have finally pushed humanists to identify the value of their disciplines and play to their strengths, after first going fetal for far too long when assailed by return on investment literalists who willfully misunderstand the fit between school and work. There is no job called English or history. Students feel pressure to use college to prepare intensively for a particular career, like training full-time as an amateur to play a sport professionally, but they will graduate into a working world where the games and rules keep changing. A more accurate analogy for school to work, instead of playing in the majors after majoring in baseball, would be having to play dodgeball with bales of data one day and ballroom dance with clients the next. So students need to train to be all-round athletes, ready for everything and anything. As finance and computer science majors are now finding out, the sudden but uneven intrusion of AI into various industries makes it even harder to time the entry-level labor market, even just a couple of years out from picking a major. This strengthens the argument for getting yourself a well-rounded liberal arts education, heavy on meta skills like adaptability, being good at learning fast and developing the critical acuity to separate the wheat from the ever-multiplying chaff in the increasingly AI-generated cascade of information coming at us from our screens. Ohio State University, Colby College, and some other schools have committed to cultivating AI fluency by seeking ways to integrate it across the curriculum. It's fair to ask why a teacher would do the opposite, not even trying to take advantage of some of the most celebrated and hyped technological innovations of our time. In response, I'd point to the gym as a useful analogy for what we're doing in school. After all, the original Greek gymnasium, or place for naked exercise, was dedicated to intellectual as well as physical development. For centuries now, we've had machines that can lift more weight and move faster than human beings, and yet if you want to get stronger and faster, you still have to lift the weight and run the distance yourself. Students should have teachers who show them how to use machines properly, and teachers who show them how to do the work themselves. The stakes are high. Marianne Wolf's rundown of the mental fitness that comes of doing your own effortful reading and writing includes crucial tasks that we as citizens of an increasingly digital democratic society do very poorly these days, evaluating the truth of what we read, for instance, or comprehending a perspective that's not our own. You are listening to a reading of articles and features from the December 7th and 14th issues of the New York Times Magazine on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. That's all in the back of my mind when we get down to business in my classroom with paperbacks and notepaper and pens and chalk ready in hand. We often start by first figuring out how we're going to come at Ann Petrie's The Street, China Mayville's The City and the City, or whatever book we're discussing, practicing the kind of interpretive self-sufficiency that Tyler sought. Do we start by simply noticing how the story is told, word choice, imagery, structure, or this time do we start with theme, organizing, logic, what we think the story is about? We're practicing not only the craft of analysis, but the work of being a thinking person, alert to the flow of meaning through the world around us, sometimes on the surface of things and sometimes below it. That's an essential part of the work of being human, and I don't think we're willing to outsource it all to machines just yet. Letter of Recommendation, George and Martha, by Hannah Kingsley Ma. There are few books my nephew and I agree on. This is because he is 4 and I am 34, and believe it or not, that age gap really makes a difference. I have read him many, many library books, books about dump trucks, celebrating Hanukkah, books about elite firefighters named Brent who jump out of planes, books about dinosaurs in which one bites another. So there is blood in the illustration, and we have to flip back every 2 minutes to the page where there is blood so we can look at the blood and talk about the blood. I'm not a tyrant of taste, but I think you can tell when a book is pandering to the supposed sensibility of children. The most special of children's books talk to children as if they are people, because of course they are. My sisters and I have made it a tradition to read to my nephew not only the dinosaur books, but also those we loved when we were little. These include the work of the author and illustrator James Marshall. As a kid, I read his books the same way an athlete runs drills, in an exhaustive, repetitive cycle, as if they were preparing me for something. George and Martha is my favorite series from Marshall. They are a pair of hippos who happen to be best friends, experiencing true, enduring platonic love. They are named after the protagonists of Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf? You know, classic kid stuff. Much of their physical comedy stems from the fact that while they are hardy in the way all hippos should be, they have really tiny eyes. They do not seem to be saddled with the most begrudging of adult pursuits like jobs, but they are constantly trying out new hobbies like dancing and holding long-standing grudges. But rereading these stories to my nephews, I discovered a layer of meaning I couldn't access when I was a kid. The promise of adult friendship, how it could serve as an organizing principle as you aged, transforming your life into a shared experience, regardless of your marital status. How complicated those relationships can be, even when they are at their most loving. Take this classic, George and Martha. Foible. Martha makes untold amounts of pea soup. George does not love pea soup, but he does not want to upset his friend. So he pours his pea soup into his loafers. Martha spots him and confronts him, forcing him to explain that he didn't want to hurt her feelings. That's silly, she says. Friends should always tell each other the truth. This is a common refrain, that friends tell each other the truth, even when it's hard. In one story, George is trying to sneak a peek at Martha's diary. In the end, he asks her if he can just read it. The punch line, no. There are times when Martha wants to visit with George and George wants to spend time by himself. Both feel misunderstood. Occasionally, they stop speaking, but the cold shoulder never lasts long. They feel too lonely without the other. Marshall died relatively young at age 50. Years after his death, it was reported that he had succumbed to complications from HIV/AIDS. After I read George and Martha to my nephew, I listened to some recorded lectures that Marshall gave to college students in a children's book writing class. In one, he described his visits to schools, how the little kids would shriek with laughter when he drew a cigar in a chicken's mouth. He followed in the tradition of very slightly mischievous illustrators and authors like William Steig and Maurice Sendak, the latter a friend of Marshall's, who understood that the best way to get children to trust you was to show them the way we talk to ourselves, even if that involves subtle irony or a wordless side-eye. I write basically to make myself laugh and my friends, Marshall said in one talk. Sendak, who wrote the foreword to a compendium of George and Martha stories, and that if Marshall's genius was for friendship, then George and Martha are the quintessential expression of that genius. I doubt that my neighbor can fully grasp the range of that genius at his age. His friendships are sincere, but they mostly consist of scream running on the playground. I was the same at his age. I still scream sometimes, and I eventually learned that I have always been the person I am because of the friends I have. They inform most everything important about me, the texture of my days, the small frustrations and petty grievances that grind me down, the gifts of my life. Everything I've written has begun as a conversation with one of them, and it always circles the same questions. How do we stay connected to the people we care about through all the great misalignments that life and circumstance hurl our way? How do we care for one another through the shifting prisms of our personalities? These same people we love might drive us up the wall. That Marshall was able to capture the seriousness of that paradox through a loafer-wearing hippo is something special. If I remember with terrible pain my lost friend and colleague, it is only because James raised the art of friendship to an exhilarating height, Sendak wrote. He made me laugh until I cried. No one else could ever do that. He was a wicked angel, and he will be missed forever. All good friends are wicked angels, tempting us to a place of greater communion through the shared invitation of a joke. All good friends will be missed forever. My nephew and I are both old enough to understand the first part of this equation, still too young and too lucky to understand the second, but someday we will. Screenland, in character. AI actors might change your sense of human ones, by Jane Ackerman. In February 1941, the Chicago Tribune announced the arrival of the year's cinematic Cinderella Girl, another actress freshly plucked from the wholesome shadow of obscurity, in this case Lake Placid, New York, by an enterprising producer who knew a star when he saw one. The game, the paper said, was to find someone striking, not just beautiful, an ability to act couldn't hurt. This particular Cinderella had been scouted before, signed up for acting classes, and taught to enter a room with a book on her head, walk down steps with her chin up, and talk in times with a metronome. After she was officially discovered, she was run through the Hollywood gauntlet, with tabloids speculating about her marriage and the odds of her signature vampish locks achieving the 1940s equivalent of virality. There was also the matter of her name. She needed something more glamorous than the one she was born with, Constance Ackelman, and less girl detective than the one she'd been using, Constance Kane. The producer said her eyes were calm and blue like a lake, and just looking at her shiny, swooping hair gave you a cool feeling, so he rechristened her Veronica Lake. Lake was just one of many stars to be reverse engineered by Hollywood in this way. Actors had their hair dyed, their manners and accents retrained, their names and stories and even ethnicities rewritten. This wasn't just a matter of Norma Jean Mortenson's becoming Marilyn Monroe's. One studio head, hoping to transform the South Asian actress Merle Oberon into an Anglophile's upper-crust dream, had her bleach her skin. Around the same time, a dancer named Margarita Cancino was undergoing painful electrolysis to alter her hairline. Her dark curls were dyed a fiery auburn and her name Americanized to Rita Hayworth. Others were made more exotic, like the big band singer Mary Slayton, who became Dorothy Lamour, wrapped in sarongs and starring in Jungle Princess and Moon Over Burma. The entertainment industry's irrepressible impulse is not just to produce movies or television or pop songs. It is also to produce people, especially women. The industry determines through some combination of data and vibe divination which kinds of humans the public will most eagerly slap down cash to see. Then it finds a way to supply them. It was probably inevitable, then, that our first artificial intelligence performers would take the form of the ingenue. This fall, a Dutch producer named Eline van der Velden claimed that high-profile talent agencies were interested in her AI creation. An actress called Tilly Norwood. She might have been better off with the kind of free association naming process that produced Veronica Lake. Norwood is far from the first artificial young woman built to entertain you. She is part of a lineage that includes digital pop stars like Hatsune Miku and virtual social media figures like Lil Miquela. Most of those projects have been treated as banal novelties, but AI's encroachment on creative work is now less of a laughing matter, and real actors were quick to denounce Norwood. Emily Blunt called the idea terrifying. Whoopi Goldberg called it scary. The SAG-AFTRA union said Norwood wasn't an actor at all. It has no life experience to draw from. Still, AI does seem like one natural path for an industry that has long sought to mold young women, pinching and prodding, bleaching and teaching, into whatever make and model of femininity the public desires. Moviegoers may not want to watch digital faces imitate emotion and feign personality, but Hollywood's history makes it easy enough to imagine a future in which we do it anyway. Look past the obvious cinematic time and money savers of AI, like filling in crowd scenes or ginning up B-roll. Just imagine the convenience of not needing to find and change real people. Why bother figuring out whom the glass slipper fits when you can build Cinderella from scratch? 2 months before Tilly Norwood's debut at a conference in Zurich, the clothing retailer American Eagle released a fall denim campaign that memorably exploded internet discourse, the one featuring the Euphoria actress Sydney Sweeney, Veronica Lake's successor in Bombshelldom. Sweeney is fair-skinned, blonde-haired, and blue-eyed. She still plays a teenager on TV, but elsewhere she tends to be received as a sort of Wagnerian uber babe. The ads showed her peering under the hood of a Mustang or pawing seductively at herself, but the endless online discourse was sparked by her monologue, which seemed written by a high school biology student. Genes are passed down from parents to offspring, often determining traits like hair color, personality, and even eye color. A male narrator helpfully informed the viewer that Sydney Sweeney has great genes. You are listening to a reading of articles and features from the December 14th issue of the New York Times Magazine on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. The culture war hooks were obvious. Some people lamented that the ads had racist or eugenistic undertones. Others cheered what they saw as the birth of an anti-woke pin-up girl. When a GQ interviewer asked Sweeney to discuss the implications of the ads, her answer did not sound entirely unlike AI. I think that when I have an issue that I want to speak about, people will hear. Barrels of ink were spilled in trying to articulate what exactly Sweeney represented, and one common theory was that she signaled the return of a red-blooded American male gaze, a country remembering, both culturally and politically, that it likes old cars and young blondes, not fretting about chauvinism. Both sides of the debate seemed to take for granted that the actress was being deployed mostly as an idea, the epitome of a product viewers desired. But American Eagle's gag only worked because Sweeney is in fact a human, with actual genes and personality, not just her Aryan sheen, but also any number of mannerisms that an AI would be unlikely to assign to a digital ingenue, like her apathetic smirk, dark eye rolling, and air of smug ennui. Such idiosyncrasies are entirely absent from Norwood's toolbox, as made clear when her creators released their own take on the American Eagle ads. In that version, Norwood has exactly the bright, bland, eager-to-please effect you'd expect. Genes are passed down from parents to offspring, she repeats, but not mine. I'm built on everything that came before me. She mimics the way Sweeney fingers the fly of her jeans. Her top is unbuttoned to show a poreless midriff. There's a robotic attempt at a come-hither look. The buttons are convincing and the jeans look like jeans, but the character, the Sweeney, is gone. It turns out that even when we think of an actress as the product of libidinous market forces, a product crafted with great effort by an industry scrambling to provide what we want, she still exerts her human life force on each role. More than in almost any other art, AI acting reminds us of its own shortcomings. If anything, it makes you crave more of the grit and quirk found even in the beefcakes and the bombshells we see as pure Hollywood constructs. It could be that a future awash in AI slop leads us to seek out and defend flashes of humanity, thrilling at all the unlikely quirks that make stars themselves. Emily Blunt's eloquent eyebrows, Whoopi's rasp, all the things a machine can imitate but we would almost certainly not invent. It could also be that an AI future just lowers our standards until we're pleased with even the most meager scraps of soul. For now, though, it can make you wonder how much Hollywood's star molding ever mattered in the first place, how much Constance Ackerman was always the crucial thing beneath the surface of Veronica Lake. The Ethicist by Kwame Anthony Appiah. What should I do about the bully in my social circle? I've been part of a small circle of friends for decades. We've shared everything: children, divorces, work struggles, the care of aging parents. But over time, the deep intimacies we once shared have now flattened, and our conversations have become mostly exchanges about food and travel and cattiness about specific family members. There is one member of our circle who is witty, generous, and charming, but guided chiefly by self-interest. Years ago, when I declined to help her pursue something she wanted, she felt betrayed and has quietly resented me ever since. I sense it, and others have confirmed it. Now at our gatherings, I feel more like a bystander than a participant, knowing from experience that any vulnerability I expose will be used by this person. Although I often feel like a potted plant at our meetups, even a potted plant can bring oxygen into the room, so I aspire to be an interested and caring listener. But that self-protective stance collapsed recently when, in the middle of a discussion about a global crisis, this person leaned over and sotto voce used a racist, dehumanizing epithet for the people affected. Stunned, I did the wrong thing. I pretended not to hear, something for which I'd always be ashamed. Part of me feared that at least one other friend might have shared her sentiment. This shame will be my burden to grapple with going forward, and I've promised myself never to stay silent again in the face of such cruelty. This episode, however, has forced me to reconsider my place in the group. Were it not for the others, people I truly love, my relationship with this particular woman would not survive. But she is deeply woven into the circle, and staying means continuing as an abridged version of myself that in turn feeds the very shallowness I lament, a friendship defined by habit, history, and pretense rather than honesty and growth. This is what gnaws at me. Old friendships, like long marriages, rarely sustain the free-form intensity of their early years. What you call flattening may also be a kind of deepening, where the dramatic highs and lows of youth give way to a lower-key lived-in familiarity built from countless small gestures of care and recognition. So it may help to distinguish between your general disaffection with the group and the specific behavior of this particular person. About her appalling remark, it's not unusual to freeze in situations like this, and the intensity of your self-reproach may be related to your own well of anger toward her. She showed herself as morally small, but it's also clear that she's long made you feel small. Your effusiveness about your shame here may be another way of indicting her. Imagine for a moment that this person moved across the country. How would you want your friendships with the others in the group to evolve? Maybe you'd diplomatically discourage the cattiness and begin sharing more of yourself without fear that your vulnerabilities will be used against you. Or is your sense that the relationships would still feel hollow? If so, you might want to explore this broader sense of disconnection. Given that she is still there, there's no reason you can't tell her calmly and directly how her behavior has affected you. If you fear she'll retaliate by turning others against you, consider first confiding your concerns with one or two trusted friends in the group. Doing so could help create a less pressured atmosphere. If being candid about your experience with this charming, egocentric, and vindictive person leads others to be supportive of you, a result could be to reaffirm the value of the friendship circle. If doing so strains the friendships, you'll have learned something about their limits and have reason to think more about the kind of community you want to participate in. Friendships, like marriages, evolve or end, and even later on in life it's possible to forge new ones. You deserve friendships that make room for your unabridged self. You've been listening to a reading of articles and features from the December 12th issue of the New York Times Magazine. Your reader has been Evelyn. Thank you for listening.
Coming up next on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service, we have a reading of today's USA Today. Following that at 2 o'clock with episode number 5 of You Belong Here by Megan Miranda. Stay with us for these readings and more.
Hello, this is Marian Heatherly, Community Engagement Coordinator for your Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service, and I'd like to talk to you as another year comes to a close. We've been reflecting on what we've accomplished in 2025 and what needs to be done in the new year, and you, our listeners, are at the heart of everything. Did you know there's a survey form on our website for listeners who want to provide feedback on programs or anything else? Please feel free to submit it at any time. The more feedback we receive, the better the service can be. Our website is nfradioreading.org, and the form is available on the bottom of our homepage by clicking on the button that says Listener Feedback. You can also leave a message on our listener line at any time by calling 716-821-5555, extension 5. Another great way to support the radio reading service you love is to purchase one of our Broadcasters Eat Their Words cookbooks. This hardcover keepsake has no pictures to take up space, just 80 full pages of easy-to-follow recipes and helpful hints from local broadcasters, national chefs, and many of our volunteer readers to try over the holidays or give as a gift to family or friends. It's only $25 plus shipping and available by calling 716-821-5555, extension 3. You can visit our website at nfradioreading.org and purchase it there, or save the shipping and pick up a copy at our 1199 Harlem Road Studios in Cheektowaga. We'd be happy for the visit. The most important message we want to share this holiday season is thank you to all of our listeners who have supported radio reading in 2025. By listening, by making a donation, by attending an event, by spreading the word about us, by connecting a new listener with us. You're incredibly important to us as we review our accomplishments of the past year and plan for the future. On behalf of the entire team at Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service, may the joys of the holiday season be with you all.